I was halfway through comparing two project bids for the new eco-housing initiative when Vincent Crane barged into my office. No knock, no warning. Just the sound of expensive shoes hitting the tile and a folder landing with a thud on my desk. "Cassandra," he said sharply, like my name was a reprimand. "We need to talk. Now." I glanced up at the man who had technically been my boss for the past 4 years, though he had never once looked me in the eye, unless he was about to insult my work or steal my ideas. Vincent Crane, charismatic, tall, always 5% too tan for someone who claimed to care about the ozone layer. He didn't sit. He never did when he was about to do something he thought was clever. Instead, he stood there, arms crossed, like a principal about to suspend a student. "The board's decided it's time to restructure," he said, tone casual like we were discussing the weather. "We're moving in a new direction, one that demands stronger vision." I blinked once, then twice. "Stronger vision?" He gave a thin smile, the kind that said he enjoyed this. "It's time to bring in leaders who aren't just following processes. We need disruptors, bold thinkers, people who can take this company into the future." "You're firing me," I said, more of a statement than a question. "I wouldn't be so dramatic," he replied with that smug tilt of his head. "We're releasing you from your position, effective immediately." No performance review, no conversation, no mention that my division had brought in the firm's highest client retention numbers in 3 years. Nothing. I stared at him for a second, then said evenly, "May I ask why?" He didn't even flinch. "You lack the kind of assertiveness this industry demands. You manage well, but management isn't leadership. We need people who can command a room, people who inspire." There it was, wrapped in corporate jargon, hidden beneath buzzwords like assertiveness and command. What he really meant was, "You're not loud. You're not male. You don't fit the mold." I'd heard it before, in more polite versions. I'd seen it in promotions passed over, in meetings where my sentences were cut off, my strategies credited to louder voices. But I stayed calm. I always did. "I understand," I said softly, but with a kind of stillness that made him pause. Vincent squinted at me, like he couldn't figure out why I wasn't crying or shouting. He expected disbelief, maybe even begging. I gave him neither. "You'll need to return your badge and laptop by end of day," he said briskly. "Access will be disabled by 5 p.m. HR will handle your severance." I nodded once, stood, and extended my hand. "Thank you for the clarity." He shook it reluctantly, then turned and walked out, triumphant in his own little game. I sat back down, exhaled slowly, and smiled. Not bitterly, not sadly, just calmly. Because what Vincent didn't know, what no one in this building knew, was that I wasn't just another executive. 2 weeks ago, something changed. Something huge. Something I had been waiting to use at exactly the right moment. I turned to look at the only framed photo on my desk. My father, Miles Wolfe, cutting the ribbon outside our firm's very first studio. One hand resting proudly on the shoulder of his daughter. Me. That photo was taken the day we opened the Chicago branch. A day I'd never forget. "You told me to wait," I whispered. "Wait until they showed me who they really are." "Well, Dad, they just did." I packed my things slowly. A ceramic mug that said "Think in Green," a small plant that had somehow survived 5 winters of fluorescent light, and 3 leather-bound notebooks filled with sketches and proposals, none of which had ever made it past Vincent's desk. Outside, people pretended not to notice. A few offered sympathetic glances. Some whispered. No one asked questions, but I could see the thoughts in their eyes. Did she mess up? What did she do wrong? Let them wonder. I stepped out into the Chicago sunlight, the wind cool against my skin. 15 years in that company, and they thought they'd erased me. But what they really did? They gave me permission. I pulled out my phone, tapped one name, Robert Keyes Escraw, and typed just 3 words. "It's time. Prepare everything." The reply came fast. "Understood. Shareholder meeting can be scheduled within 5 business days." I looked back at the sleek glass building, now shimmering in the sun. Vincent thought it was over. But he had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks earlier, I sat alone in my apartment with a sealed envelope in my hands and a note taped to the front in my father's handwriting. Do not open until your 33rd birthday. It was exactly midnight. The only light in the room came from a small lamp on the kitchen counter and the soft glow of the city beyond my window. I turned the envelope over once, then again. My father had always loved symbolic gestures. He said they made important moments feel earned. And this felt monumental. I broke the seal slowly and pulled out 2 papers, one handwritten letter and a legal document embossed in gold. The letter came first. Cassandra, if you're reading this, then you've turned 33. And that means you're ready. I never doubted you. Not for a second. But I knew the world might. And I wanted to give you something no one could ever take away. You've worked twice as hard for half the recognition. I've seen it. You lead with integrity when others lead with ego. So I'm giving you the power to choose your future. This company, my legacy, is now yours. I stopped reading. My hands trembled. I blinked hard and turned to the second document. It was a trust agreement, notarized, signed 5 years ago, the year he died. It stated in no uncertain terms that 90% of the company's voting shares had been placed into a private trust under my name. Those shares would remain dormant until my 33rd birthday, at which point all ownership and voting rights would be transferred to me, 90%. I read it again, then again, my breath caught in my throat. I wasn't just a shareholder, I was the majority owner of the Wolf Design Group, the very company Vincent Crane had just released me from. I picked up the phone and called Robert Keyes, our family's longtime attorney. Robert, is this real? He didn't hesitate. Yes, Cassandra. It's very real. Your father set it up to avoid public filings. The trust is airtight. The board has no idea. My head spun. Why didn't he give it to me sooner? He wanted you to experience the company on your own terms. He wanted you to see what it had become, and then decide for yourself whether you wanted to lead it. That line hit me like a freight train. He'd known. Somehow my father had anticipated that this company, the one he'd poured his soul into, would lose its way. That it would lose me in the process. And he'd prepared for it. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was on fire, cycling through every board meeting where I was ignored, every project proposal Vincent shut down without reading, every time my work was handed off to someone louder, brasher, more male. But now I had leverage. I met Robert at his office the next morning. We sat in the same wood-paneled conference room where my father once signed the charter for our first European studio. The leather chairs still smelled faintly of cedar and old ambition. We'll need to schedule a shareholder meeting, Robert said, carefully laying out the process. Once we file the paperwork, you'll have full authority to address executive leadership. I paused. Not yet. Don't file anything. I'll let you know when. He looked at me. Do you mind if I ask what you're planning? I stared out the tall window at the city skyline, the same buildings I helped design, the same city Vincent believed he ruled. I'm planning, I said slowly, to walk back into that boardroom and show them exactly who they tried to erase. He nodded once, no more questions. Outside, the air felt sharper, like something had shifted, and it had. The last time I stood in that boardroom, I was an employee. Next time, I'd be the owner. And this time, they would listen. Over the next 48 hours, I moved with precision. Every meeting, every message, every file I requested through back channels had a purpose. I met with Helena Bishop in a quiet corner booth of a little cafe off Dearborn. Helena wasn't just the trustee who had managed the dormant shares. She was a vault of memory, loyal to my father's vision. Sharp-witted, discreet. She never said more than needed, but when she did, every word landed like a gavel. I've been waiting for your call, she said as she slid a thick folder across the table. Your father told me there might come a day when the wolves would be inside the house. I didn't think it would be this soon. I opened the folder. What stared back at me wasn't just disappointing. It was damning. Executive overreach. Vincent's private travel charged to the corporate card. 4-star resorts during industry retreats no one else attended. Lavish dinners disguised as client meetings. Internal complaints from staff swept under the rug. 2 whistleblowers quietly pushed out of the company last year. Both female. Both brilliant. And both had worked under Vincent. "There's more," Helena said, her voice low. "The numbers he's been presenting to the board are massaged." I looked up sharply. "How massaged?" She leaned in. "Projected figures inflated, actual revenue flatlining. He's been covering it with optimistic forecasts and premature earnings reports. On paper, it looks like growth. In reality, it's a plateau headed for a cliff." I gripped the edge of the folder, knuckles white. "He's hiding behind bluster," Helena added. "But if this continues for another fiscal year, the company will bleed out. Quietly. From the inside." I sat back, breath caught somewhere between fury and fire. Helena studied me for a beat. "You're not just here to punish him, are you?" I met her eyes. "No, I'm here to protect what my father built, and the people still holding it up." She gave a single approving nod. "Then you'll need the support of the board. Most of them are still loyal to your father's legacy, but they've been lulled. Vincent makes the room easy, until someone questions him." That tracked. Vincent was always charming when unchallenged, but I'd seen what he did to people who spoke up, especially women. He weaponized doubt, subtly, strategically. "He won't see this coming," I said. "That's the idea," Helena replied. I took the folder home that night, spread the documents across my coffee table, and began to organize. Patterns emerged. Timeline, context, recurring behavior. It wasn't just a case of mismanagement. It was a clear narrative of negligence, vanity, and manipulation dressed up in spreadsheets. The next morning, I met Robert again to finalize the shareholder meeting request. "We'll send the notice on Friday," he confirmed. "The meeting will be scheduled for Tuesday. That gives them 2 business days to panic." I smiled faintly. Perfect. But before I walked out of his office, I turned back. I want to speak last at the meeting. Let Vincent go through his usual routine. Let him think it's business as usual. "You're sure?" Robert asked. "He won't hold back." "I'm counting on it." Because arrogance always leaves a blind spot. I spent the rest of the day preparing my case. Clean, bulletproof, and impossible to deny. The numbers would speak. The records would back them up. I wouldn't need fireworks. I wouldn't even raise my voice. I'd let the facts speak and let Vincent destroy himself with the one thing he never saw coming. A woman with power and nothing left to prove. Tuesday morning arrived sharp and gray, the kind of morning that buzzed with quiet tension. Rain clung to the sidewalks like a warning. I dressed with care, navy suit, minimalist jewelry, sleek hair, not to impress, to remind. I didn't come to knock. I came to claim what was already mine. When I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist did a double take. "Miss Wolfe?" she said, half rising. "Just Cassandra," I said gently. "I have a meeting upstairs." She didn't stop me. She didn't have the authority anymore. The elevator hummed as it carried me upward, 11 floors of stillness, except for the pounding in my chest. Not fear. Focus. At the top floor, Robert Keyes met me outside the boardroom. His expression unreadable, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. He was ready. "They've started without you," he murmured. "Good." Through the frosted glass, I could see Vincent in full performance mode. He was at the head of the table, gesturing with that smug confidence he wore like cologne. I pushed open the door without a sound. All conversation stopped. Vincent paused mid-sentence, his mouth still half open as his gaze landed on me. I watched his brain stutter, then his jaw set. "Cassandra," he said flatly, like my name tasted bad. "This meeting is for board members only." I walked to the table and placed the folder in front of the board secretary. "Exactly." Murmurs started, chairs shifted. Mr. Powell, one of the senior board members who'd worked alongside my father, squinted at the documents. Vincent straightened. "As I was saying—" "You were saying nothing," I interrupted, voice steady. "And now it's my turn." He stepped forward, eyes narrowed. You don't have a seat at this table. You're no longer an employee of this company. I'm not here as an employee. I met his gaze without blinking. I'm here as the majority shareholder. The room fell absolutely still. What? Someone whispered. Mr. Powell adjusted his glasses, flipping through the folder. Is this accurate? Yes, I said. 90% of the company's voting shares were transferred to me through a private family trust. They activated 2 weeks ago. Vincent laughed, too loud, too forced. That's ridiculous. Your father would never… He did, I said quietly. Because he knew someday someone like you would try to take everything he built and turn it into a vanity machine. Robert stepped forward, sliding the notarized trust agreement and stock certificates to the board secretary. Vincent's face went pale. You're bluffing, he snapped. This is a stunt, a revenge play. No, I said, leveling my voice just slightly. This is oversight. This is accountability. This is the moment you realize you weren't in charge. You were on borrowed time. Mr. Powell turned slowly to Vincent. Is this why the financial reports have been inconsistent? Vincent opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I took my seat at the head of the table, the one Vincent had always reserved for himself. I didn't gloat. I didn't grin. I let the silence fill the room like smoke. As majority shareholder, I began, I've called this special meeting to review the current executive leadership, including the position of Chief Executive Officer. Vincent shot to his feet. This is a coup, a personal vendetta. You think you can just waltz in here? I'm not asking, I said, cutting him off. I'm exercising my legal right. I slid a second folder across the table. Performance evaluations, financial audits, staff complaints. All signed, all documented, all pointing to him. Let's talk about results, Vincent. Let's talk about how you hid behind charisma while this company began to rot from the top. No one spoke. Vincent looked around the room, searching for support, but no one met his eyes. Because even they knew. His time was up. Vincent was still standing, red rising into his face, but the boardroom had gone cold. The confidence he carried so easily just moments ago now looked brittle, like thin ice waiting to crack. Let me be clear, I said, opening the second folder. This isn't about revenge, it's about responsibility. I pushed the performance reports across the table. Employee satisfaction down 34% in 2 years. Turnover among senior architects up 40%. 2 internal investigations buried by HR. Inflated revenue forecasts that don't align with actual client contracts. All of it signed off by you. Vincent slammed a hand on the table. You think you can twist numbers and smear me to get your way? I raised an eyebrow. I don't have to twist anything, Vincent. The numbers speak for themselves. So do the people you ignored, replaced, or pushed out. Mr. Powell cleared his throat, flipping through the documents. This is troubling. I nodded toward Helena Bishop, who had just entered the room quietly, unnoticed until now. She took a seat near the window and placed a small black binder in front of her. If the board would like to review financial corroboration, Ms. Bishop can walk you through the original documents and how they were verified by third-party auditors. You brought a backup, Vincent sneered. How cute. No, I said calmly. I brought receipts. The board was shifting. I could feel it in their posture, in the way eyes flicked down to the folders and stayed there. Doubt was blooming in corners Vincent never expected to be challenged. I also have statements from former department heads who were pushed out or silenced, I continued. I have copies of severance agreements designed to muzzle whistleblowers. And I have emails, ones you signed, referring to female staff as undermotivated liabilities and junior men as promising future leaders. You built a hierarchy of mirrors and fog, and I'm here to clear the air. You're bluffing, Vincent said again, but his voice had lost the edge. I turned to the board secretary. As majority shareholder, I'm submitting a motion to remove Vincent Crane from his position as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. The boardroom fell silent. You don't have that kind of power, Vincent said, his voice rising. You need a vote. I hold 90% of the voting shares, I said, a majority by any legal or corporate definition. The board secretary looked stunned. With that ownership, a second isn't required. The motion stands. Vincent laughed bitterly. This is absurd. You're a strategist, not a leader. You've never run a company. And yet, you just got fired by me, I said, finally letting the truth hit the room with full force. His face twisted. Anger, disbelief, panic. But he didn't fight it, because there was nothing left to fight. Security was already waiting just outside the door, not because I asked for them, but because Robert and Helena knew the kind of man Vincent was when the spotlight turned off. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just stared at me like he couldn't recognize the woman in front of him. He only saw me when I was beneath him. He never thought I'd be the one above. When the door closed behind him, I looked around the boardroom. No one clapped. No one cheered. That wasn't the moment for it. Instead, they watched me, evaluating, waiting. I took a breath, then spoke clearly. This company deserves better, and starting today, that's exactly what it's going to get. Mr. Powell leaned forward, eyes steady. Welcome back, Cassandra. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not out of politeness, not to ease tension, but because I finally felt what power was supposed to feel like. Not control, not revenge, but alignment with truth, purpose, and legacy. I didn't move into the CEO's office right away. The big desk, the corner view, the nameplate, it could wait. What mattered more was the people. The ones still here. The ones who had endured. The ones who were silently waiting to see what kind of leader I'd be. So I began with a walk. Not a parade, not a statement. Just me, notebook in hand, moving through every department from finance to facilities. I spoke to anyone who wanted to talk. And for the first time in a long time, they did. Some were cautious, burned before, wary of change that came in sharp suits and empty slogans. But most were honest. Their frustrations had been simmering beneath the surface for years. I sat with the junior design team and asked what made them excited to come to work. Their answer? We don't remember. I sat with the maintenance staff, who told me they'd requested updated safety equipment 5 times, each time denied by Vincent's executive office. I met with HR and opened every unresolved complaint still sitting in pending status. I read all of them. Every single one. By the end of the first week, I had a list. Longer than any blueprint I'd ever drafted. But this one was real, urgent, and alive. I called it the Rooted Revival Initiative, named after a phrase my father used often. Design should be rooted in purpose. Leadership should be too. We began by promoting from within. Maya, a quiet genius who had been handling crisis communication for a year without the title or the pay, became head of client experience. Jameson, one of our night shift architects, came forward with a redesign proposal for our entire internal workspace that had been rejected by Vincent because it prioritized staff wellness over executive parking. I greenlit the plan immediately. Kevin, a lead developer who had resigned 6 months ago after being overlooked again and again, returned. We welcomed him back with the respect he should have received years earlier. And the toxic layers? They came off like old paint. 3 mid-level managers were quietly let go. The kind who had built small empires of fear under Vincent's passive watch. No dramatic firings, no announcements, just an end to intimidation as a leadership style. Then we launched something bold. Something that had lived only as a scribbled dream in my father's old journals. The People First program. It offered direct recognition for collaboration and creativity, regardless of title. Receptionists could pitch ideas. Interns could shadow directors. Executive bonuses were tied to department morale, not just metrics. The change was immediate. Within 2 weeks, the office sounded different. Laughter returned to the break room. Desks, once sterile, were suddenly decorated again, with family photos, tiny succulents, and personality. People stayed late not because they feared for their jobs, but because they believed in their work again. We began talking about architecture the way my father did. Not just as business, but as a responsibility to leave spaces better than we found them. And I didn't need a CEO title to make it happen. I just needed to listen, to see people, to prove that power doesn't come from position, but from presence. Late one evening, after everyone had gone, I walked past the new staff suggestion board we'd installed in the common area. Someone had written in neat blue ink, "She doesn't command the room. She grows it." I stood there for a moment, hand on the wall, heart full. Because that was the kind of leadership Vincent never understood, and exactly the kind my father always believed I was capable of. It was raining again, just like the morning Vincent fired me. But this time, the sky didn't feel heavy. It felt like renewal. 1 year had passed. 12 months since I walked out of this building carrying a cardboard box and 1,000 unspoken thoughts. 12 months since I stood outside, not as a failure, but as a fuse waiting to be lit. And now, I stood in front of the same glass doors. No box, no anger, just a leather folder under my arm and peace in my chest. "Morning, Miss Wolf," the front desk receptionist said, standing when I entered. "Elena, please," I replied with a smile. "We're all on the same team." The building felt different now. Not just brighter, but warmer, like it had remembered how to breathe. As the elevator rose to the top floor, I thought of my father. He used to whistle in elevators just to cut through the silence. I smiled softly at the memory. The doors opened to the executive floor. My floor. I hadn't redesigned much, not because I lacked vision, but because I didn't want to erase what mattered. I kept the original walnut desk, the broad windows, the simplicity. What changed were the things that truly defined a space. The photo wall was no longer filled with sleek black and white headshots of executives. Instead, it showcased team retreats, product launches, site builds, and office celebrations. Moments led by people whose names had once been buried under someone else's credit. And on the far wall, framed behind my desk, was the one image that kept me grounded. My father and I, standing side by side on opening day, both beaming. He had one hand on my shoulder. He always said that was the day he knew I'd take over, not by force, but by choice. The numbers this quarter had shattered projections. Revenue up, employee retention up, client engagement at an all-time high. But what mattered more was how we got there. Ethically, collaboratively, transparently. People didn't whisper complaints in corners anymore. They spoke freely and were heard. Our leadership team was now 60% women. For the first time in company history, 3 department heads came from non-traditional backgrounds, including one who began as a janitor and had risen through innovation grants. Diversity wasn't just a metric anymore. It was our engine. There was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," I said. Maya stepped in, no longer nervous or uncertain. She wore her confidence like a tailored jacket now. "They're ready," she said with a grin. "Board meeting in 5. I stood, smoothing the front of my blazer. "Let's go." The boardroom, too, had transformed. Not in decor, but in energy. Gone were the silent nodders and performance posturers. In their place sat thinkers, challengers, builders. Half were under 40, half were women. All of them were here not for control, but for progress. At the center of the table sat Richard Tanaka, our newly appointed strategic advisor. A mind as sharp as steel and a heart as grounded as oak. He gestured toward me. "Before we begin, Cassandra has something to say." I hadn't planned to speak, but standing there, surrounded by possibility, I understood something. This moment was the one my father had prepared me for. I stepped forward. "Thank you," I began, "for choosing truth over tradition, for listening when it was hard, for believing that this company could be more than just its name." I paused, then smiled. Someone once told me I lacked leadership, but leadership isn't about who talks the loudest. It's about who listens longest. It's about who's willing to go last, so others can rise first. Silence, then soft nods, and then applause. Not loud, not performative, warm, earned, real. That afternoon, I didn't take the elevator straight to my office. Instead, I walked the long way, through each floor, each department, like I used to when I was just Cassandra from strategic planning. No title, no power, just another set of footsteps in the crowd. I passed the engineering bay, where laughter echoed over design drafts and energy drinks. I peeked into the creative studio, where one of the junior interns was presenting her first pitch. I paused outside the new wellness room, an idea proposed by a night janitor, now fully funded and thriving. In the break room, someone had baked cupcakes for Leo's last day. He'd just accepted a scholarship we helped sponsor. I took one, sat among them, and talked about everything except work. We talked about weather, music, childhood stories. Because this wasn't just a company anymore, it was a community, and that was worth more than any quarterly report. When I finally returned to the executive office, I walked in alone. No assistant, no camera crew, no ceremony. Just me. On the corner of my desk sat the only thing I'd brought from the old office, a framed photo of my father and me on that very first opening day. I picked it up, brushed my fingers across the glass. "Not bad, huh?" I whispered. Then I placed it back on the desk, not as a monument to him, but as a compass for me. The nameplate on the door had been changed last week. Sleek brushed steel, understated lettering, Cassandra Wolf, Chief Executive Officer. It felt strange at first, but now it felt right. Because I hadn't earned this through a title, or a bloodline, or a coup. I'd earned it by enduring, by watching quietly when others shouted, by holding steady when others tried to shake me. It was exactly 1 year to the day since Vincent Crane tried to erase me with a single sentence. And now? Now, the walls no longer echoed his voice. They carried laughter, creativity, conflict turned into solution, ideas turned into action. The culture we'd rebuilt wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was growing. I opened my laptop and scanned the latest culture survey. Employee satisfaction up 44%, turnover down by half, mentorship participation tripled. But it wasn't the numbers that made me smile. It was the final anonymous comment at the bottom of the report. For the first time, I wake up excited to come to work. That's what legacy looks like. Not in headlines, but in hearts. There was another soft knock on the door. This time it was Maya again. "You ready?" she asked. I stood. Always. As we walked toward the conference hall where a new round of internal promotions would be announced, this time based solely on merit, I looked around and felt something unexpected. Not pride, not triumph, just peace. Because I didn't take the company back to prove them wrong. I did it to make something right. And that was enough.